I was never going to shoot digital. Oh, no.
It's the Photo Focus July Roundtable. It's episode 6 in 2022. This one's called Noon and Night. I'm flipping toggles and switches over here. I'm your slightly more equal co-host, Ron Pepper. I'm here as always with Rob Moroto, and this month we have special guest co-host Pi Jersa from SLR Lounge, and our featured author from Photo Focus is Bob Coates, where we're going to be discussing his article about challenges of shooting big groups right at noon. So, welcome all of you for males of the species this time. How's it going over there, Pi? Down in LA or LA area, Orange County.
That's good. Yeah, I live in Orange County. It's great.
Sorry, I know I always mess that up.
It's pretty hot in Sedona here, but other than that being so hot, it's fabulous.
Nice. Rob's from Great White North up there in Canada, so he's got a whole different experience.
It is. It's nice and rainy and cool. Look, I've even got an alpaca sweater on right now because it's so cool up here.
Oh, geez. Well, before we start talking, let me thank our sponsor first. That is Photomatics for high dynamic range photography. In fact, I'll instead of describing a little bit, I'll just mention that we've got Photomatics Pro 7 coming out here pretty soon. And I'm a bit of an insider with them, as people know, and I've been looking at the beta. So we've got new things like batch processing, and it loads it for you, loads a preview for you. You can choose your settings and move on. So it lets you skip a lot of the steps in doing it one by one, and then it'll run the whole batch for you after you've chosen individual options and a few other things. So that's the excitement there. If anybody has questions about that subject, well, I'm not sure about Bob if you're much into high dynamic range, but I know the other three of us have at least a lot of experience with it. So shoot your questions at photofocus.com. And with that, let's go right into our first little discussion. Let's hear a little bit more about each one of our panelists coming up, but I wanted to jump right in. We're doing a little bit bookends on photo tips and technique, where we'll talk about shooting at night and a little bit later shooting at noon. And I've got one other topic in between that's not shooting, but I want to go right into Milky Way, because I was talking to Bob about this before the show, about coming on the show. And Bob, you've been doing actual classes shooting the Milky Way recently. That's that right?
Yeah, I just did one for the Arizona Professional Photographers Association up here in Sedona. We're dark sky compliant. One of the 6 or 7 areas that is actually, set up for being dark sky, because everybody has to keep their lights facing down and stuff like that. So that's very helpful. But
I didn't know that was an actual thing. So is that specifically for photographers?
No, it's for towns. Like it's like Flagstaff, Sedona. I think there's a couple of places in Utah.
And Palm Springs does that, doesn't it?
Interesting. Who?
Palm Springs?
No, Palm Springs got a lot of lights over there.
Really? Okay, yeah, I just remember that they don't have their street lights on.
Okay, that's part of it, but it has to do with how the lights are set up and how much they light, and how much education is given to new construction and all that kind of stuff.
And so you're talking about regulations on construction and on street lighting.
Yep.
Wow,
that's great for light pollution. What's the principle behind that?
Well, the light that comes down reflects back up, and if you look at a Dark Sky Finder, which is an app you can do to find out how much light is actually being reflected. If you look on the eastern half of the country, oh my goodness, it's just lit up. And then there's lots of pockets out west that are dark, and they have different colors representing different areas of brightness. And the less bright that it is that you're shooting around, the darker the skies are, the more stars you're going to see.
Yeah, it makes sense from a photography, specifically astrophotography standpoint, to want that. But I'm curious from a city standpoint, why would they? What is the principle behind that?
Tourism.
Oh, really?
Huh.
They want to come see. People want to come see the stars.
Oh, interesting.
Think about if in around Orange County in LA, when you look up, you don't see very many stars. So getting out to like Joshua Tree and some of the dark sky areas in Utah and stuff, people just they pay money to go see the heavens.
That's
Did you
fascinating.
say
Interesting.
that? Did you say they can't exactly be pointed down either? They can be pointed up or down. I'm not quite sure what.
No, they want to point them down, have them under overhangs as much as possible, certain wattages. There's a whole set of instructions that go with that.
That's
It's
amazing.
interesting. I was listening to another podcast about the effects of light pollution on the environment, more specifically against the effects that it has on bugs, and then how that changes how the birds migrate and how it changes how the feeding patterns of bats and things. So it's interesting that this is all coming from more of a tourism standpoint, because it's also very good environmentally. So interesting to hear.
So yeah, for all the city people, when you go out to, I remember when I was in college, I went to college in Vegas, and we would go out to the desert where you could see, if you look back toward Vegas, you look in the sky, you see all kinds of stars that most of us had never seen before, and then as you look toward the city, it was like a dome of darkness because the light was just coming. It was amazing. So if you get out, that's where Bob is apparently dug in and teaching classes there. So, hey, my question for Milky Way, something I haven't really done, is it much like shooting when the eclipse was up a few years ago, and we had a lot of talk about that, and people were using mechanical tripod heads to move with the planets, I guess. Do you do anything like that for Milky Way, or is it possible to do without?
Yeah, some folks do. I do without, and what I do is the idea behind doing that is you're able to capture more light. The whole idea is when you look up and see, even if you look at the Milky Way, even in a dark sky area, like we're in a Bortle 4, there's a Bortle 1 through 9. So Bortle 4, 3, 2, and 1. 1 is like there is no light, period. So at a Bortle 4, you can see when you look up, the Milky Way does not look like it looks in the pictures. It looks like a band of just light cloud going all the way across.
Right.
So the idea is that the lens has a nice wide aperture, or the wider the aperture, the better. And it's going to gather light over a time period versus our eyes, which can only see it for whatever time we're looking at it. So as the sensor gathers the light, the longer you can leave your sensor open, and the wider the aperture, the better light capture. You're going to capture all the gases and all the lights and the stars that are further away.
So then the amount of movement isn't that significant like it would be with the moon?
It's very significant. So depending upon how wide your angle of your lens is, you can leave, let's say, a 20 millimeter lens open or a 7 millimeter lens open for anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds, and you're not going to get those star trails. But any time much longer than that, you are going to get that.
Okay.
So the idea behind the trackers, like the Move, Shoot, Move, there's a bunch of different ones out there. Basically, they take in the account the rotation of the Earth, and they go with the stars so that you can leave it open longer, and you don't get the star trails.
Isn't that interesting? 15 to 30 seconds, and after that, you start getting the star trails.
And probably even before there's a thing called the rule of 500. So
Okay.
you divide your lens into 500, and that tells you approximately how many seconds you can leave the lens open before you're going to see star trails. The sides of the lens are going to start to see trails faster than the center of the lens, but it depends, and you can capture as much as you want. The other way to gather more light is to do multiple exposures. So you leave your camera set, and then you fire your, say, 8-second exposure, so you're for sure not going to get any star trails, and you fire it 20 or 30 times, and then you have something like Starry Landscape Stacker, where it will stack all of those together, and it will put them back together again because it's moving. But the Starry Landscape Stacker looks at that and puts them together and piles up your light, if you will.
So most of the images that we see published have done that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the ones you see published, and you've got the color and the smoke and the clouds, and all the different things going on. That's part of it is processing, and part of it is the gathering of the light.
It's interesting. You said that. Okay, so that rule again. It was divide your lens by 500. Correct.
So if you have a 20 millimeter or 20 millimeter lens,
Yeah.
500 divided by 20 equals
1/25th of a second. Yes. Okay.
what? No.
No.
Other
25
way.
seconds.
Go the other way then. That's 25 seconds. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Basically,
So-
the tighter you are, then the more you're going to see movement, right?
Correct. Yeah. So if you have a longer lens, those things are going to start moving faster and faster.
I like having these
Ivy.
rules. It's like the inverse of your the inverse law, where it's like if you've got a 100 mil lens, you can shoot it at 1/100th of a second, right?
The rule of 500 is actually starting to become an antique law because our sensors are getting so sensitive. If you photo pills, to me, is the Bible of finding the Milky Way and being able to predict where it's going to be and how long you can leave your shutter open and stuff. And if the rule of 500 on your lens may say 30 seconds, Photo Focus has a thing that says this will absolutely never have it, and it'll be more like 8 seconds. And that's why you'd want to do the multiples or do the tracking in order to gather enough light.
This is when math enters photography.
Yes,
Whenever I tell people that photography has a lot of math, they go, "What are you talking about?" And this is one of those times. Because we mentioned a couple other laws that we shouldn't go into now, but there are other ones like that. So,
Well, the nice part about photo pills, though, is you can plug in, you can say, hey, my camera is this, my lens is this, and this is the aperture that I'm shooting at, and it will figure out those numbers for you. You just go, oh, okay, set my time for that.
I wanted to mention Photo Pills. Actually, it's just a great resource anyway. It's a phone app, but they also have a website that has quite a lot on it, and I've been using it for some things over the years. I recommend that for people who want to go more deep into this kind of subject. But anybody else have any quick tips on night or Milky Way? I just wanted to say that when you go out, say you're out camping or you're in one of those places where there is no light pollution and you can see it, that Bob quickly mentioned it, but the Milky Way usually gets mistaken for a bit of a cloud. It's a lot of times you'll see it be really light, and then someone who knows will say, no, that's the Milky Way. So it doesn't look like the way it does in the photos. That's an important thing. I just wanted to pin more than you did when you mentioned it.
You'll find the galactic center moves throughout the year, just like a lot of other heavenly bodies. In the beginning of the hunting season, Milky Way hunting season, it's over to the southeast to south, and it moves to the right through the night. As the season goes on, it'll be closer. It'll be starting in the south and moving to the southwest. So Milky Way hunting season is probably March to October. For the galactic center is what you're looking for. That's where everything's happening there. You can shoot the Milky Way going north, but it's not going to have all the extra gaseous material.
Interesting.
That is fascinating. That's something that books are written about, and it's hours long shows. But let's kind of move on. And before we get to the next topic, I just thought I would introduce each of us as we go along and not just pile on all at once. So let's Bob, you're featured later, so you got to wait. So, I know Pi from watching educational material that is just really well done at SLR Lounge.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And recently, one reason that, I think you and I have been kind of lightly in contact over the years here and there, but I started watching, we watch Instagram things at night, my son and I, is kind of one of our routines. And a lot of times I've seen you pop up with these short tips that I just think are wonderful, because it's the kinds of things we do on podcasts and stuff. So it's just like how to improve like a portrait, just improve it by one or two little moves of thinking about the background and the shade or something like that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was great. I'm glad you could come on. Thank you again. And then I'll let you do the rest about what you are shooting and what you do professionally.
Yeah, so our focus is primarily wedding and portraiture. A little more than 10 years ago, we started a studio in Orange County called Lynn and Jersa Photography. It became kind of one of the larger studios, and at the same time, we launched the SLR Lounge. It was an educational platform where really I kind of just, it was honestly not supposed to be what it was. It was just, I was teaching our employees as we were growing the business. I was teaching them the same things over and over and over. So I thought, why not make videos on this? And it was right around kind of where YouTube was getting popular. So we started uploading them to YouTube, and it wasn't long that we had a decent following. And we thought, why not kind of where Lynn and Jersa is the kind of in practice, like this is how a healthy multi-7-figure studio operates. Why not make SLR Lounge kind of the manual for how to operate that studio? So that's kind of what it became. So over the next several years, we filmed and documented literally every single step from not just how to pick up the camera and learn from zero, but then how do you direct clients and learn how to pose and do portraiture and work with couples, and eventually every single piece of a wedding and how to run and market a successful business. So it kind of became two different elements. And through that, as the platforms grew and everything, I started doing, I became a guest host for Adorama TV, and that's where most of my like photography related content goes these days, is kind of through Adorama TV.
Yeah, I think I saw you on there. That, in fact, real quick plug for Adorama TV. They are. I know Dave Bergman has been doing stuff with them, and I don't want to throw out other names because I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe. Anyway, another good thing to shout out is I catch that on YouTube sometimes, and so I remember I loved you have a progression on posing couples, and I just love that one because that's something that is not in my main. We're photographers, we do all these things, but we have our strengths and weaknesses, specialties, and experience, right? And I remember it was a couple of years ago at least, I guess, but I really like that little process just to, when I don't know what to do, I can lean on that. So check out that's Lynn Jersa. It's Chris Lynn, Pi Jersa, right? Chris Lynn,
Justin Lynn, and myself.
Oh, okay. There's more. Lynn Jersa Studios.
I know it's a bit of a tongue twister. All of our names are tongue twisters. Going forward, I made all of our business names much, much easier.
I like that. Yeah, I like that Pi is the short name because I always know I'm Peppers. My last name's Pepper, so I always have the food names always jump out at me. So
they're easy to remember.
Although it's PYE. Okay.
And it's funny, like when you go on Instagram, I just wanted to find you on Instagram, and as soon as you type in PYE, you're there. You're the second name that comes up, which is perfect.
Yeah, there's not too many pies out there.
No, definitely.
Take advantage of those things that are unusual. That's being Ron. There's nothing unusual about that, but Pepper, yeah. and so yeah. Second topic we've got here makes me laugh and cringe at the same time. I saw some articles. In this case, it's the newest one is. Actress model. I don't really know. I looked up Emily Ratajkowski. Looks like
she's super famous.
Is she super famous, or is that a?
Yeah, she's really famous.
Well, geez, I'm not that old. Looked like a. I looked on IMDb to see, and I didn't really notice any. What I noticed was that I think she was herself in the documentary about the Fire Festival. So,
yeah, she was in that. She got popular after a music video that she did. Was it Robin Thicke?
Okay, good.
She basically danced completely nude in a music video, and this thing blew up. And that's where she kind of. But before that, she was kind of just not as well known. But then she became very mainstream after that.
Well, looking, I feel like I've seen her, but I don't really know where. But anyway, so this is an audio thing, so people can know that she is model and actress, and someone that people are going to be happy to look at her photos of her, of course. But she actually was sued again, not by the same person, but by a second time by a photographer because she posted a photo that he took of her on her Instagram. And so I'd love to get, there are a couple more layers, but before we even go into another layer, we're all photographers, and we might not be paparazzi photographers, but with all of all the history of famous people having the love hate with paparazzi, and yes, they have a job to do, and do some of them do it in a bad way? Yeah, there's all those layers, but to be sued for using a photo of yourself, what do you think? Who wants to tackle that first, just really on the surface? Because like I say, there's a couple other layers. No one wants to jump
on the
out
surface.
that
I feel like it's a very weird thing. I guess it's one thing if you're in if you have a contract with a photographer and you're hiring them to create artwork, that's a bit different, right? But it's weird if I walk into the street and I'm agreeing that, if I'm in public that I might be caught that's just a public agreement that we all buy into, right? You go into public, you might be in a photo or something. But then it's weird to kind of like allow paparazzi and people just to take pictures without any express permission, and then for the person in those photos not be able to use them. Because from an artistic expression standpoint, and maybe maybe one of you guys will hammer me for this, but coming as the creative, like there's usually not a lot of creative value in a photojournalistic paparazzi photograph. I mean, we're not talking composition. We're not talking like lighting. We're not talking about much other than literally snapping a shot. Yeah. So the value of the photograph is the person inside of the photograph. Yeah. And yet the person inside of the photograph is unable to actually use it. They can only allow the other person to get monetary gain from their own likeness. And I find that to be incredibly strange.
Right. And agreed. At the same time, should the person be able to use? Let's not talk about how much actual work and effort goes into snapping that photo, maybe, because that's a different thing. But should the person be able to use the picture that Rob Moroto shoots for monetary, to make money from, without including him, without including the photographer? The other way around too, I can also see that, where like when we get into intellectual property conversations about what actually does go into, like, why can't I copy that gorgeous, Peter Lick photo, and why do I need to, it's infinitely copyable. It's data. Well, a lot went into creating it, so I understand that there's that value too. Like I said, I don't want to go into how much effort goes into creating a paparazzi snap, but I can see both of those where it all comes down to, we can take photos whenever we want of people wherever outside in public, but that it changes when someone starts making money from it. And
I think it's interesting
both ways.
If you look at like whenever I do a photo shoot with models, we get the models, we do the model releases, the models ask for a copy so that they can put it onto their portfolio, and typically that's normal.
Yeah.
And in the paparazzi stuff has always got me, because it's, in a sense, we're actually taking pictures of people, and they may be doing things that are technically considered private and sometimes actually on their own private property. And here we are, we're supposed to believe that we're allowed to keep full ownership of it, even though we've never actually gotten their consent. We don't have, like, they're the only ones in the shot. They're the ones that are the main focus of the shot. Therefore, they should have the right to refuse its usage based on not having a model release. But
I'm with you on that, Rob. And I also feel like if the person's going to take the photograph and use it monetarily, that if we could simplify the law by saying if one side uses it without consent, the other side can use it without consent as well.
Ooh, that's a good one. Nice.
It's one of those, like, well, you use my photo to make money. I'm using my own photo because I didn't give you permission. Therefore, you can't tell me that I don't have your permission. We both don't have each other's permission. Therefore, right?
We should have said this at the outset that no one's a lawyer here, but
no,
I know
right. We're just very opinionated.
We're all exactly. That's why we're here. At least in the U.S., it's very clear that if I'm walking down the street and someone takes photos of me, I can't just say you can't take a photo of me. That's
you can say it.
You're welcome to say it. You're welcome to exactly. And if you're a photographer and you're cool, you'll probably just go ahead and do what you're asked to do or not do. But that doesn't mean, from a legal standpoint, which just makes things worse, you can do that if you're out in public. Now, when you go, how you use it is a whole different story. And so I just think Okay, so we hit a little bit on that, and just to add the layer that I wanted to mention is that we also have this guy we probably all remember. That was Richard Prince. I'm looking at some text to try to get it right. He's the guy that, and I'm going to put these two together in a second. He's the guy that was adding his own comment on someone's Instagram, then taking a screenshot and making it his own, saying that he had what's the word? Had
Altered it.
altered it significantly or whatever to make art from what's the word I'm missing?
It's like an interpretation of someone else's.
Derivative art? Is it derivative?
Derivative.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he did a whole show on it, and I guess apparently profited quite a bit, because that's always matters. Is did he just go do it for charity or for nothing or for fun? That's one thing, but he made a whole bunch of money off of people's Instagram photos, which many of them must have been very nice, and just added his own comment, took a screenshot, a screenshot of all things, and did a lot with it. And he's been sued all over and over and over, and I think he's pretty much won them. So now,
That's interesting.
now we have back to Emily Ratajkowski. She has fought back in the best. Let's see. I would call it a good troll. I'd call it a troll in a good way. That she's shot a photo of herself at her place in front of one of his so-called derivative arts. Made an NFT out of it. And is trying to.
Genius.
So she's taken back the let's say copyright by taking a photo of his. I guess he painted over it or something, derivative wise. It's a photo of her. I'll put the link to the Verge article that I'm looking at in the show notes. But so she's taking advantage of it. And I mean, the NFT part of it, I'm not sure is even really necessary. I think if she took with her camera, and she's in the photo, so I'm assuming it was either a timer or the article is saying that, okay, she's taking a photo of herself, her likeness, in front of another photo of her that was made artistic by the other guy. And then they were saying, and probably this photo is taken by yet another photographer that has some kind of copyright claim to it. Or maybe if I were her, I would have just done it on a timer. Her hands are in the photo, so doesn't have a remote, so maybe she had it on a timer. But she's taken back control, so she says, now that's mine again. So I don't know. I kind
of love that she made an NFT out of it, because that's a huge area of issue right now within NFTs, is people just taking these images and artwork done by other people, but they say that once they put in an NFT, it's now derivative art again.
Yeah.
These are all areas where I feel like the law is, 2-3 decades behind, and it takes all these issues to kind of like work through it. But it's weird that in the case of, like that one creator, it's weird when the law sides on the wrong side. Like when you look at it from this standpoint and you're like, derivative artwork should be, you should be adding something meaningful to it. And I guess that's where the opinion and the line is difficult to draw, because what's a meaningful addition to something?
Yeah.
But you need plenty of examples of these, I'm going to take someone's artwork and add a quote to it, and now it's a meaningful derivative. You need tons of them until people recognize that maybe that's not such a meaningful derivative of this. Maybe that's very much copying and plagiarizing.
And isn't that one of those times where a reasonable judge would look at the letter of the law versus the what's really happening here and say that, okay, by the letter of the law, maybe, but this is ridiculous. Wouldn't that be one of those times? I don't know. I don't think we need to relitigate the Prince. I'm getting all the names mixed up in my head. Richard Prince. I don't know if we need to go back too much about that, but the fact that, like Pi said, that there's so much, they're so behind the whole system of all of these, the ways of protecting just get taken advantage of. And I'm glad, by the way, that was Pi that brought up the challenge with NFTs, saying is, well, who initiates that? Once you just make an NFT out of something that someone else did. And I'm a huge advocate of the whole blockchain world, and I think it's going to change the world. It's not just Bitcoin. It's other things like intellectual property, and that's what NFTs are, except it's people went crazy with trying to get rich quick on it, and it's kind of lost so much of its meaning. Where if I can just use the blockchain to say, "Yep, that's mine," then that's great. But you brought up one of the main concerns I have, again, as someone that wants to see that succeed and sees the value in it. That where does it start? Can you just who's to prove that the initial minting was the right person, and that's something that I want to be solved too.
You just threw out a whole bunch of copyright stuff. I'm just gonna make people aware of something new that just happened. Was pushed with PPA and ASMP and all the photography associations. There is now the opportunity to protect your copyright if you're a wedding photographer, portrait photographer, and people take your work. Before, you really couldn't unless you registered the image with the Library of Congress and bought a lawyer that's willing to jump in. You couldn't really fight for your copyright. People could just take your work. Now you're able to have a small claims copyright in Washington for awards of $3,000 to $5,000 versus before, if you didn't have at least 30,000 or more, nobody would get in and work with you. So, and you can bring it yourself to the thing. So that's some new information for photographers that just came out in the last couple of weeks.
That's wonderful. Can you get me a link and I'll put that in the show notes, because I think we'll have a lot of people interested in that. It doesn't have to be now.
Yep.
But again, that's hopefully innovation that can either solve something or lead to a better solution, because that whole Library of Congress thing, in certain situation it works, but it's just a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. Depending.
Bob, are we going to have a copyright issue with the fart book in your background?
Yeah.
My eyes just...
No, it's just sitting on my shelf, man.
It's derivative.
It's derivative. It's got your face in it.
Yeah, because it's flanked by the Does It Fart, the complete guide to animal flatulence. So it's kind of the juxtaposition is the derivative work there.
It's a beautiful.
So you're writing in your spare time.
Hold on one second. You guys keep going.
It's interesting that you bring that up. It's I was amazed. One of the photos that I took of a kitchen for a client got hacked. Well, it got stolen, and it's partially I look at it as I looked at my client and I said, well, you put the high-res image on Facebook, so yes, anyone could have downloaded it. But what happened was there was a company that took that image of the kitchen and then they replaced the lights, so the light fixtures that are hanging down. So instead of being like the regular light fixtures that the designer put in, they changed it out for a different product light. And then they changed it out with several other product lights. So there's a bunch on Amazon and Wayfair right now where you look at these lights and it's all the same picture of the same kitchen. That's my kitchen that I shot, but they changed out the lights. And so the first thing I did was I just went online and said, well, Facebook group, what do we do? And the number of people that referred me to different lawyers throughout the states for this kind of copyright infringement was amazing. And so it seems like you have a lot more litigation going down there, or litigators down there, or do we call them litigators?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
To look after copyright infringements. And it's actually quite a big deal. And I was surprised at how knowledgeable a lot of people are down there about it. It's interesting.
I've heard to go when we get into these talks, a lot of times just reaching out and letting someone know that what they're doing is not exactly right, and that there's some compensation that should be happening. That's usually enough.
Well, that's your first start, but yeah. Many times you do that and they go, yeah, sue me. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in that case, that gets ugly, but a lot of times, Rob, yours is a little bit different because they're pretty darn committed to those by now. But if a lot of times it just ends up being that it just gets taken down, and so there's really doesn't really do anything for anybody. But yours is a little different. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I had another case like that up here, and I talked to a lawyer friend of mine, and they said, well, here's my email address. Here's a cease and desist letter. Send that to them, CC me in it, and that's it. Because once they take it down, that's it. You can't sue them for anything else. You can't do anything else. They've complied. So that has been what we've been doing up here, but it's a lot more interesting down there, especially when they're able to make profit off of it.
There's probably
To
no
me,
shortage
there's
of
a
lawyers trying to help, right?
there's a big difference between like I think most copyright infringement cases are like individual people, mom and pop. Like I'm going to start up an online business and I don't know the rules, and to me, cease and desist makes sense in those cases because it's just not. I mean, even if there's a legitimate claim, is it worth going after them? Like even if you
No.
win it, do they even have the ability to pay it? So it's kind of a big waste of energy on all sides, beyond just simply asking them to take it down. But I think there's a real case we made when you're talking about Wayfair or like an organization that is large enough to know better, that is actually making a significant amount of money off an image that they did not get permission for. And in those cases, I do feel like the photographer should go after the company to be compensated for those images. But there's kind of so in a case like the one that you're describing, that to me makes sense. It makes sense to go after a company that should know better, essentially, that has the means to actually license. And it's so inexpensive. Like that's what I don't understand is you can go and grab an image from Adobe stock for nothing. You can go and ask the artist for, they'll likely say $200, $500. It's nothing. But a copyright claim is pretty substantial. Like it can be, $30, $40, $50,000 easily just settling a claim. So it's a strange thing when someone like Wayfair goes and does it. You said it was Wayfair, right, Rob?
Yeah, you can find it on Wayfair. You can also find it on Amazon, but it's I don't actually know who the actual producers of these things are. I just know that that's where they're selling them from.
Oh, I see. So they're using. So it might not be Wayfair. That's just the platform that they're using.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's the people who produce the lights that are making it
infringing.
happen.
Yeah,
And then that gets weird again because if they're likely international, which a lot of times they are, right? A lot of times they're Chinese manufacturers or any other place. Then it's basically impossible. Like the only route is to tell Wayfair to pull it down, and that's it.
pretty much.
There's a licensing calculator out there that gives you a fee based on type of usage and the how far spread it'll be. So if it was printed, how many copies? If it's on the web, there's something else for that, and you could use that to get an idea of what you might be missing out on and if it's worth doing something about it or not.
Or if I'm just spinning my wheels for nothing here.
I mean, I'm not that someone that has that much faith in the court system because it just doesn't really work for the little guy, but in this case or other cases, but I wouldn't feel good about just saying, oh, there's not much I can do and letting someone use something for profit. That's where it goes in. And I don't want to sound like such a huge money oriented guy. Lord knows if I was, I'd be living differently, but
Wouldn't be doing this podcast.
yeah, exactly. I'd do everything I would do would be for making money. But at any rate, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to allow someone else to go make money off of something I did. That's not okay. So
takedown notices make sense in all those cases. It's just unfortunately the majority, because I have a lot of friends that deal with copyright claims. And unfortunately, unless the company that does it is actually generating revenue and they have US based or like in the country, you have to be based in the country that you're suing out of. If it's international, it pretty much makes it like almost impossible. So beyond a takedown notice, you're kind of wasting your energy. So it has to be like they've gained a significant amount of revenue that's demonstrable. Like you have to actually prove it. They have to be US based. And then if it meets that criteria, like it's worth kind of going after, so an example of one is I have a friend that does fine artwork, and I guess I'm not going to name specifics, but in a Netflix documentary, they basically filmed this entire documentary in his art gallery.
Oh, wow.
So the entire backgrounds to everything are his artwork, and there was no permission, there was no nothing. And so those make for kind of examples of like, okay, you're kind of crossing a certain line here, and it's Netflix. They definitely are here, but unfortunately, when it's like a Amazon seller, which these are just the majority of them, it's an Amazon seller. It's someone on Wayfair that's using another platform. They're international-based companies. The photographer wastes tremendous amounts of energy trying to do something that is virtually impossible to collect on. And that's where I always kind of advise like our students and our peers is like, you need to know when it's just a waste of your energy versus when it's actually worth pursuing.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. It's funny when, like, I shoot a lot of show homes, and we have this one builder who has a affiliation with an art gallery, and so whenever they get a huge show home that they're showing to the public, they get this art gallery to put up all the art in it. They asked me to come shoot it. However, I have to Photoshop out all the artwork because the
For that
artists
exact
do not
reason,
give permission to republish it.
And that explains some of the work that goes into these things that many people don't think there's any value there. Oh, it's already there. Why can't I just copy it? And those are some of the many reasons that there is a lot of work that goes into just one image. And speaking of which, I'm using that as a transition.
Well done.
Speaking,
Very well segued.
Thank you. Speaking of a lot of work that goes into an image, we wanted to talk about Bob's article. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this show is each month we get a chance to see someone's article and ask questions, add to it, critique it if it's, positive and well done, and throw our own ideas and stuff like that. And so this time we have Bob Coates, who you know a little bit by now because we've been talking. And his article is How to Cope When You Can't Wait for the Right Light. And it's in the context of a big group portrait. So a lot of challenges there. And before we get a little more into the article itself, Bob, why don't you take a chance to tell everyone a little bit of what you want people to know about you?
Oh, basically, I'm a commercial and fine art photographer in Sedona, Arizona. And I've been very fortunate to be a photographer during the time that I did, growing from film through the digital age. I was never going to shoot digital. Oh no. And ended up, being stuck with just a digital camera one time because I was testing it for a company and was, showed up to the wedding and there was no film. I got this digital camera. You mind if I use this? And I turned digital, very shortly thereafter.
Wow.
So essentially, mostly fine art. I've been through weddings and portraits and, seniors, all that kind of stuff, but settled into fine art and commercial work now.
Have you always been in Arizona?
No, I started my photography career in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I lived in St. Thomas for 20 years. And then the last 3 years that I was there, I decided to make photography my career, and basically just got to where I was really, one of the, 2 or 3 names that you would call in order to be, hire a professional photographer. We moved to Sedona. One too many hurricanes chased us out.
Well, one extreme to the other in a lot of ways, but both of them are very photographically attractive.
We could not move to an ugly place. That was one of the criteria.
Yeah, if you're going to move to a desert, that's one of the most beautiful right there.
We got a good one.
So your article is one of those great challenges. One thing that attracted to me was a few years ago, Levi Sim and I were doing the problem solving podcast, and I would have used this as an example for the problem solving podcast because the link is in the show notes. Anybody listening, if you're not driving, just go to the show notes and open up his article, and you'll see the final image at the top. You've got how many people in there? I should have counted, but
I don't know. I didn't
40,
count, but
30,
there's at least 35 or 40 maybe.
Yeah. And so it's a group shot, and Bob was asked to do this group shot right at noon in the middle of the desert, so you're gonna have these harsh shadows. So I should let you tell us, start out, and we can add in let us know some of the main challenges, and I think we'll have questions for you and maybe even ideas.
The main thing is when you do events for corporate companies, especially, they're on a schedule and they don't care, whether the light's right for you.
Yeah.
So the difference between, to me, a professional photographer who really knows what they're doing, they're going to come home with the shot no matter what. So at high noon, if you were to shoot that, if you look at the bottom one, man, those shadows are nasty and it's a very high contrast. It's to me, it would not be an acceptable photograph as a, I'm an available light photographer. So the major thing was being able to fill in those shadows, light the faces, and make it happen. Part of that comes from having auxiliary lighting that has enough power to equal the sun to fill in those shadows. And basically, the light from that I'm lighting is not really lighting the subjects. It's lighting. It's opening up the shadows so that they're not objectionable.
And how
And
much power does that?
they were just Paul Buff White Lightnings. I think I had three lights, and I try and carry umbrellas to spread that light out. But you know what? It's super high contrast anyway, and if the wind blows and you've got your lights where they need to be, they're going over.
You have to carry an
So
assistant for each one to stand there and hold it.
exactly, and I don't have the budget for that. I'm a one man band pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
But essentially just shot them with the 7-inch reflectors. And the major portion of it is making sure that you have a light meter to go in and make sure there's an even wash of light across the entire group. And then the other part is those lights are up there on 13-foot stands. If the lights were down lower, the shadow from the flashes themselves would fall onto the people behind that were there. So having those lights way up make a huge difference because then that drives the shadows down behind the people. So those are my major tips for making that work.
If you don't have the lights at the right height, you'll get what we used to get in elementary school group photos, where the tall guys in the back row would always have a shadow that looked like a big mullet
Yes.
behind, and that was normal.
Exactly.
And if anybody is not looking at the image now, the before image also not so you have the sun, which we all know in the middle of the day, harsh shadows, not where you want to take portraits. Well, there are also these, I guess, are they called bistro lights that are hanging across?
Yes,
There's four rows of lights.
That was the really fun part when they said, I came out and said, well, this is where we need to take the photo. Okay. Oh, can we take those lights down? Because they cast their own shadows as well. The lights that I'm throwing in made those shadows for the most part disappear, but there was some extra retouching there where there's a little bit of shadow still coming through that needed to be, covered. And then of course for the removal of the lights, that was a bonus that I did, because to me having that up there was such a distraction from the portrait that was being done. I made them disappear. God bless Photoshop.
Yeah, not the toughest cloning job in the world, but it took some time, I imagine, to make it
was
look right.
actually harder than you think, because it was not just going through the sky; it was going through the rocks and through through the scene itself. So a lot of that had to be rebuilt.
To me, I think the hardest would be removing the shadows from the wires on the people, because then you get into some real detail. So when I said not the toughest in the world, I meant still not easy, but the sky and the trees, at least that part would be not too bad. But making it doing it professionally though is,
that would be difficult.
That is
especially if you got one of those light bulb shaped shadows casting over somebody, like half the person's face. How do you bring up the shadow in that without destroying that?
One step at a time.
Like making that, how it is when you isolate an area and then you brighten it, but then you get this weird halo that happens around it, and it's tough to blend that back in nicely. So, no, very well done.
Well, there's some other things that most people wouldn't notice, but I think you mentioned it in the article, but also I noticed right away that you brought in some furniture, so you didn't have to just have everyone standing or kneeling. So you added some variety by, actually taking control of it and saying, what can we bring in here? What can we do? Rather than,
whenever, especially when you're posing, well, any group, you want to have a musicality. If everybody can just line everybody up in, and pile them up one behind each other like we used to do on the bleachers and things, but that's not got a very good look to it. But adding the furniture made a big difference. We pulled in the couch and a couple of chairs, which gives you a way to maneuver people. And some people are obviously sitting on the chair arms, and some people are sitting on the chairs and then behind the chairs. So we're we're able to add a lot of interest and put more people into that space in a comfortable way.
How would you like looking at this picture? I'm thinking that this would be a nightmare to take. Like I've got three little boys that every Christmas I'm trying to take a group shot of three kids, and I can't get them to all synchronize a smile or a look or not blink. How do you do that with something like a shot this big? Because the countdown method never works, right?
No, there's a couple of things that go on there. One is I have a radio voice, and it's very powerful and very authoritative. And I know how to take a group of people and make them do what I want them to do and make them think that it's their idea. The other part is this is 90-degree day. And basically I said, you know what? The faster y'all work with me and the quicker we get this done, the quicker you can go in and have that cocktail at lunch. That was a big thing. And then the other thing is I always take multiple images and make sure that I kind of look at each individual group area and make sure that there's not a single person closing their eyes over and over again. And then I can go back in and swap out a few heads here and there.
Did you know you were going to do this beforehand, or did they throw it at you? Or
Oh,
were you there for
no,
something else?
I came prepped for this.
Okay, good. That's
I
one of the things-
I also shot it from on a ladder. When you're shooting a large group of people, if you stay on the ground level, the people in the back will tend to get smaller. If you get up a little bit higher, you're tilting the camera forward just a little bit, and that'll make the faces of the people in the front more equivalent to the ones in the back.
How high do you need to get for that typically?
Oh, 5-6 feet, just enough to kind of, lean so that your camera is tilted forward for the shot.
That's a
Well,
great
Bob,
tip.
I'm already 6 feet. I mean, are you that small that
6 plus 4 feet is 10 feet tall. I guess if you want your camera to be up about that far, yeah.
Okay. Wasn't sure I understood there.
Well, that's what the ladder was for. I'm 6 foot as well. Well, I used to be 6 foot. I'm 5'11" now.
I've never been
one thing I
6
found is
feet.
that just a few inches can make a big difference when you're talking about, like, say, interior photography. So
Yes.
I wonder if being outside, I wonder how much a foot or two. I'm just kind of I'm looking for getting a frame of reference for how much difference it would make by me standing on my tiptoes and getting my camera up to be nearly 7 feet and holding it up a little high, or really getting up there a few more feet. So it sounds like adding a couple feet.
The few extra feet really helps a lot.
Okay. I mean, that's an important tip, really, that we don't notice from really looking at the photos. So. What would you guys do?
Yeah, Pi, I think you're more into this than I am. Any,
Pi, I was
recommendations?
one thing I thought about asking you is that I've seen some of your wedding stuff, and you've got big groups with colorful as all heck, some of them.
Yeah.
And I wonder, there's got to be some pretty big challenges getting those groups too.
Yeah, we run into the same issues that Bob has. Like, I mean, a wedding timeline doesn't really give you permission to wait for the ideal times of day to take photos, and you have massive groups and everything has to be done fast. And we'll do photographs like this, the one that Bob has taken. And honestly, I would use the exact same approach. So I wouldn't change a single thing. We would look for elements or a scene where we can actually, what I usually look for first is a scene that has okay light to begin with, meaning like there's not any crazy, light that's landing on them that I have to compensate for. They're either fully backlit, fully in the sun, somewhere that like we can start with something okay. And then the second piece would be like, if a lot of our groups would be 30, 40, 50 people, do we have elements of the scene like Bob used where we can actually pose? Because we need something to be able to stage. You can't just have, and the way to kind of get around that is you have some people sitting, some people kneeling, some people, kind of hugging in, some people standing. But it's best when you have furniture layers that you can build that group on. Then from there, we would do the exact same thing. We're going to set up the cameras. That cross light that Bob has is a very safe and good way of doing it, because the lights on each side kind of, what we would do in this situation is, the only difference is like we wouldn't have the time to do a light meter. So everything that we're doing is by eye and experience, but we're going to aim each of those lights basically across the group. And so
Correct.
the shadows for each one is going to eliminate each other. So you end up creating a flat light, which is the right way to go because a group this size is going to cast tons of shadows. Like Bob said, you also need, our rule of thumb when we teach our shooters is that you want the lights to be just above the tallest person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 15 feet in the air, but it needs to be higher than the tallest person. So if the tallest person is at 10 feet because they're standing on something, we need the light to be just above them. So like you said, it doesn't cast shadows. Yeah, from there, the other thing, like Bob mentioned, using the zoom reflector, the other reason, in addition to like wind, you said your stands can get blown over. Of course, that's a huge issue. The other side too is as soon as you put on some sort of diffusion in midday conditions, you don't get enough light output to land on your subjects. Even if you throw a 2,000 watt light into an umbrella, it's not enough to light a group that size. So really you're left with, ideally you want something that's at least like 500 watts, 250 will work, but you want more. And you're left with like zoom or throws to get the light to go all the way to your subjects. And even at that midday, you're talking about what Bob said, it's fill. It's still not going to overpower the main light, but it's going to make the shadows a lot more desirable. So we would approach it identically.
Okay, and the funny part is where I learned how to do this was through my wedding work.
Yeah.
It's all many genres of photography cross pollinate. I learned a lot about posing and moving people in my weddings that I use in my corporate work, that I use in my, and then so back and forth. They all kind of mesh together.
Yeah, that's what's fun about weddings that always has held my attention is it's kind of you kind of began as a master of none, but with a decade in it, you kind of begin to master each of these little components. You're doing product photography, you're doing, portraiture, you're doing large group portraiture, you're doing journalism, you're doing, creative type portraits and dance portraits. And then with enough experience, you can kind of take all those into other arenas and be like, you know what? I could be faced with any of these challenges and still come up with something that's professional, something that is on par.
Mm-hmm.
How big a team do you take to weddings typically, Pi?
Our typical team is 3, but we do about 400-ish weddings a year, like boutique weddings. So our creative team is pretty significant in terms of like how many people on any given day we can handle usually between like 8 and 10 weddings. And they're larger weddings, like Indian weddings and 300-400 people. Usually when it gets up to like the 300 plus, we recommend like a 4th person, but for the most part, it's a lead shooter, a second shooter, and then an assistant.
And do you have? So I know some wedding photographers. They'll have a team of that size, between 3 and 5, and there'll be some creativity. Like one assistant or photographer will come back and say, "I've got this idea over here, and I set it up or something like that, or I want to try it out or whatever it is." Because what made me think of it was when you said you don't bring light meters anymore, which I would still need that because I just don't have it down I don't speak that language every day, so I would really have to test. And so if I was to find a location and say I got an idea for a group shot over here, and maybe have already tested some with the light meter on myself or something like that, and then get everybody over there for what Bob said about once you're there, you execute it, you get everybody to do it 5 minutes in and out. And that seems like a good combination of ways to handle those, the creative part of the wedding that can be unique for that client.
If you're working with experienced second shooters, you could definitely do that, and that's often the case where one person will set something up and be ready for it. Honestly, though, we train all of our leads not to rely on seconds, and we train seconds not to rely on thirds. So that way each kind of operates independently. So a lead shooter for us has to be able to basically set up, like the setup for that shot for Bob would be something we would expect a lead shooter to do in like 3 minutes. So 3 minutes, you got both. And we have a lot of, the way that we get around this is like in our education is a lot of recipes. So we literally give you a recipe for each of these situations that you just kind of start to memorize. Like I know that if I'm going to step out midday I don't even need to take a light reading. I know that I'm going to go full blast on my flashes. And I know that I need to aim them right down the center, get as much zoom as possible, because there's no other way to get enough light.
Right.
I also know, like, another quick rule of thumb is if you're doing an evening portrait, right? And you set your ambient light exposure to 1600 ISO and you're at f2 and you're at 1/160th of a shutter and you're getting the perfect kind of dramatic shot. Well, you can start your flash at the inverse of your ISO. So if you're at 1600 ISO, a simple place to start is 1/16th power. And if you're at 800, go 1/8 power. And if you're at 3200, go 1/32nd power. Then from there, getting dialed in is a matter of 1 to 2 test shots, and you're good to go.
Right.
So we kind of expect lead shooters to be able to set up their shots within 1 to 3 minutes, so that they can match the pace of the wedding, because the pace is pretty insane on a lot of our wedding days.
That sounds like it. Yeah, I'm
No,
famously not interested in wedding photography, but it still sounds fascinating from.
It was a hell of an education, I got to tell you.
Yeah, yeah. If it was just the
for sure trial
photography,
by fire.
if it was just the photography and not all of the layers of craziness that go on with weddings, then it'd be great. But it's not. It's not.
Yeah, no, it's. I guess for some, it's very stressful. For others, it's like this. For others, it becomes the challenge that kind of makes it fun. Like personally, a lot of my weddings, I get the partners will get a lot of the bigger weddings, and so photo budgets for my shoots are between $30,000 to $50,000 for a wedding. And the fun part about it for me is like the actual performing of it. Like I've got an 18-hour day, and the stress and the pressure becomes, I guess, part of the, it's weird to say, but it's like part of the enjoyment. Like there's some performance aspect of it where it's like when you've got a group of 30 people there and you can go and create something right in front of them that doesn't look anything like what they're seeing, the results are pretty incredible, right? Like seeing their faces. And so if you get accustomed to that and it becomes part of what you enjoy about it, then shooting at a high level is very rewarding, both kind of like from a career standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. But then there's a lot of people that it's not suited for, like the pressure, the stress of it, the dealing with, brides, grooms, the parents. Like you're always, a lot of people, they go and they shoot at their first like big wedding. And, I have stories where someone will come to me and be like, the dad just can't, we can't curse, so I'm not going to curse. But father of the bride just came up to me and yelled at me and told me to F off and that I shouldn't have taken 10 minutes during this piece. And I go, welcome to wedding photography. Like this is, especially when you start shooting big budget weddings. I mean, the bigger the budgets, the less time that they're going to give you. That's kind of the general rule, and the expectations go up. And if you're not getting somebody like just kind of not yelling at you necessarily, but yelling to like move and direct, and if you're not getting that at each time, I'd wonder, how are you getting your weddings? Like what kind of weddings are these? Because it's not my experience.
You have to be a puppet master.
Yeah, exactly. And like Bob said, Bob, you talked about that voice and the authority and being able to, direct large groups of people. It's being able to, when father the bride comes to you and says like, how the F are you doing this? It's pulling yourself out of the situation and realizing he's not pissed at you. My background psychology, this is why like this stuff fascinates me, but he's not pissed at you. He's pissed at a number of things that are not related to you. He's just directing his anger towards you. So in those moments you say, Dad, I want you to relax. Don't worry. I got this handled. I'm going to have you out of here in 5 minutes.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah.
But that's the norm. And you have to, it has to match your personality, or you have to be willing to like gain those skills if it's going to be something sustainable for you. Because we all know wedding photographers that burn out, and it's usually because it doesn't match their personality. Like the job requirements doesn't match their personality.
And it's interesting when we look at photography as a general, we always have people that say, oh, it's just taking a photo. Look, here's a camera, click. But
Yeah.
I hope this shows that there's so much more that goes into it. It's not just the camera. It's not just what goes into the camera. It's everything else, from the management of the people to the management of the scene to management of the equipment to the post and everything else. So it's great to have everyone on here that understands that and can talk about it this way. So I know we've got a hard stop coming up here. So I think this would be a great time to be able to say, Bob, thank you for joining us with your wonderful article there.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let's let I know Pi needs to probably pop off first. Do you want to let everyone know where to catch you real quick before you go, or?
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. You can find me at Pi Jersa, and if you guys want A to Z training on kind of everything photography to running successful portrait studio, wedding photography business, then you can jump on to slrlounge.com.
And like I say, I asked Pi on because of great stuff that I've seen, and I'm a photographer for a long time, and I still learn tons from him. So, highly recommend. Thanks so much for joining us, Pi. Hope to see you again on here. I know you got to run, so I can get that checked off, and then let's hear from Rob, because we held you and I till the end as far as what we're doing and where to find us.
Yes, no, definitely. I can be found at Rob Moroto, and that's all on pretty much any platform there. And yeah, we'll definitely see us here on these podcasts. And we've got another Q&A podcast coming up. If you have any questions for us, by all means, we send them our way. And Bob, where can we find you?
You can find me in Sedona, Arizona. Online, it would be successful-photographer.com. If you want to see the artwork that I create, it's coatesart.net. So, and if you want to do a Milky Way class, a little bit, little workshop between 1 and 4 people, get in touch, because that's probably my ideal number to get you out there and really get you up and running on shooting Milky Way.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, guys. I should say I'm Ron Pepper. You can find me at ronpepper.com. Most social media, Instagrams are Pepper, but we'll have all these links in the show notes. Come on, I put a little time into the show notes, so please check those out too. And we will then be able to see you in a month for Roundtable, and in a week for Q&A, as Rob mentioned. Questions at photofocus.com. Hey, depending on the questions we get, I might ask some of the guys on here or some of the other people we've had before to come on to answer those questions, see what questions we get, and if I can get an expert on weddings or an expert on night photography, whatever it is, then I will try to do that. Questions at photofocus.com. Thanks again, Photomatics, for helping out, sponsoring here. Look for the new version 7 coming soon. And with that, we'll see you for it'll be August Roundtable.